Now we're going across the Hamilton's police station, and this is another direction to get to Techniques Order. And there's the People's Pharmacy on the right. Okay, now we're coming up on Victoria Street. Victoria Street and King Street. We're going to take a left onto King Street. Now we're right at the stop sign. King Street and Dundonald Street. And onto King Street. Now we turn right onto Curvin Avenue. And this is Techniques Order. Now I'm going to adjust the valves, and for this part of the work we just have some basic tool that's needed. Just need a 10 spanner, a feeler gauge, and for these adjuster you can either use a small Allen key to fit in the eccentric, or you can just get a piece of welding rod. Other than the tool, you normally need to have the correct specification. So if you don't know the specification, it's best not to try and guess it. A lot of mechanics try and just use a measurement they think that will work for the valve clearance. So I have the repair manual over here. And before we even put it, you have to always take care of the book. You don't want to get messed up. What I'm looking for here is just the valve clearance specification, and you can clearly see right there, M10 engine, valve clearance, intake and exhaust, and for the engine code, M10 engine, and it's 0.20 millimeter. That's basically 8 thou. And that's when it's cold. When it's hot, then it's a different measurement, 0.25 millimeter. One of the reasons, the main reason why you have two different clearance is when the engine gets hot, the metal expand. And when it expands, it means it gets larger. So there's less clearance between the two moves, between the valve and the rocker arm eccentric. So for that reason, if it's cool, you have to use a different measurement, and if it's hot, a different measurement. So right now the engine is disassembled, so it's obviously cold, so we're going to go with the 0.20 millimeter. we're looking for here? 0.20 millimeter or 8 tau. So there's different ways of adjusting the valve. You have the ruler 9 that some guys like to use, but I prefer the other way that most institutions teach you how to adjust the valve, and that is at TDC and the compression stroke. Compression stroke meaning the piston at TDC and both intake and exhaust valve is closed. TDC, top dead center. So this means the piston at the furthest part it can travel upward. On the compression stroke, the camshaft lobe going to be in the downside of the lobe or the back of the cam lobe. And if you look at the camshaft here, you can see, for example, this cam lobe, the intake and the exhaust is both, it's on the overlap, coming off exhaust, going on intake. So that's number 4. That means number 1 will be on the compression stroke. But lucky enough, with this engine you can physically see the camshaft, so you actually know which position the camshaft is in. So we have the camshaft right there in the center of the back of the cam, where we can adjust the valve. Some person will take the adjustment from between the rocker arm and the camshaft, but with this specific engine, the manufacturer wants you to use it to measure it between the eccentric and the valve, that place. And the adjustment is not difficult. You just got to open and close this nut to release the tension from the eccentric. And this is the tool that we make up to adjust it. And basically we turn in. You can see the eccentric turning right there. And what I'm going to do is just put the feeler gauge between the eccentric and you don't want it tight. Like right now you can see I lock it a little bit so the gauge can't move. That means it's too tight. You just want to release it a touch where it's not tight and it's not loose. And once you have it at the correct position, then you lock the nut. And you can see the feeler gauge is nice and waxy. It's not loose and it's not tight. So this valve is completed. And we'll just repeat the process. I'll repeat the process on each cylinder. And one of the easy ways to know which valve is next is going by the firing order. With this engine, it uses a 1342 firing order. So the next valve, if I rotate the engine clockwise, then the next cylinder that's going to fire is number 3. Clockwise, then number 3 will be in the position to adjust the valve. And it's kind of easy doing it this way. That's why I'm doing it now before we put the head on. Because once you have the head on, then you need to rotate the crankshaft. And it's more difficult and a little bit hectic. So it's just simple doing it now and get that part of the work out the way. So now number 1 has been adjusted, and I'm going to adjust number 3. You can see how the rocker arm is tight, this one tight, this one very loose. You can hear how much noise that would make in the engine if the engine was running. And basically this cam don't really carry a nut, so I just put 2 10-bolt in it, and I'll use that to rotate it clockwise. And what I'm looking for here is number 2 cylinder coming off the exhaust stroke, coming off the exhaust, number 2 cylinder coming off exhaust and going on intake. So basically in the rack like that. So it coming off exhaust and then going down on intake. So keep your eye on here, and you can see this valve going down. And you can see, so let me just go back a little bit. Okay. So now you can see it's on top of the cam lobe, and it's going to going down, 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 down. Now I'm actually stop paying attention to it going down. Now I'm looking for that moment the exhaust valve, the intake valve, just about to start to open. So I'm going, and right there you could see it make just that ever slight jerk. That's where I want to stop. And if I go back just a little bit, and you look, pay a good close attention, come over a little bit with the camera. And I actually just holding it because the valve is loose. So I need to see when it actually, the exact moment it start to open. And you see just that movement right there. So it actually went a little bit too far. Right there. This where in a racing engine would use what you call a degree pulley. So we can see throughout the entire revolution, 360 degree, you can see the exact degree each cylinder is on, and where you want to make different adjustments. With a stock engine, you don't have the luxury of that unless you're using a dial indicator, but your eyes is good enough to tell you when it's on the rack, and you can go to the valve you want to go to. So now you can see this 2 valve, one coming off exhaust and it going onto intake with the cam rotating this way, meaning it going clockwise. And now you can see these 2 valves completely loose because they're in the position, the center of the cam lobe in the back. Now we can adjust these 2 valves. So I'll start with the intake valve and the number 3 cylinder. And what I'm doing here, I'm going to put a slight tension on the lock nut, the locking nut, ever so slight, so I can rotate the eccentric without a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to put a slight adjustment on it, a slight tension on the lock nut. And see, I actually lock it up too much so the feeler gauge can't move. Now I just need to back it off just a touch. And it's too loose. And it ever so slight. So now I have it correct. So now I'm going to hold the adjustment in position and then lock the nut, the lock nut. Once I do that, I gotta check it again. And it's good. Okay, so now you can see the difference there now. There's not a lot of looseness like this before. Now I'll do this valve, do the exhaust. And it's just a little bit unknowing with how they designed the adjuster with this engine. But it's still a good design because it actually functions similar to a high performance rocker arm. Very close to a roller rocker arm setup. And it's nice and waxy. So I can lock it up. Then I'll check it. Perfect. Okay, so number 1 valve has been adjusted, number 3 has been adjusted, and we're going with the firing order. So the next cylinder that's going to go, that will go on the compression stroke at TDC would be number 2, because the firing order is 1, 3, 4. So 1, 3, 4, 2. So it's actually number 4 going to go in position for adjustment. And you have to continue with your clockwise rotation, because if you go anti-clockwise, then you know you throw the whole process off. So now I'm looking at the exhaust valve on the number 1 cylinder, and it will be coming up, meaning it coming off exhaust. Close to the end of the stroke, I'm going to start to look at the intake valve. And I'm looking for that ever slight movement on the intake valve. So here we go. And it's really tight now, because the valve them not loose as before. Okay, so you could see I don't have to shake it now because these valves adjust, so I can actually just look at it. And you can watch this one coming up. Then now I'm start to look on the exhaust. And you could see just about it actually gone a little bit too far. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. Okay, so I go back a little bit until there's no movement. Now I'm going to go back and clockwise, and I'm looking for that ever slight movement. And I'm going slow, right there. So now we can do number 4. And as I say, they have different ways. You have the rule of 9, which some guys really love, but I like it on the compression stroke. So now I'm going to just repeat the same process here. And I'm going a little bit faster now. It's too tight. Now it's too loose when I lock it up. So I gotta do it over. And it's just a touch too tight. Now it's nice and waxy. So now I gotta hold it in position while I'm locking it. And it's too loose again, so it did move. So what I'm going to do now, because you run into this kind of problem sometime when you're adjusting the valve. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just loosen it slightly, and while it's still tight, I'm going to just bring it back, just put just a touch on and lock it before I actually check it. So I'm not releasing the adjuster, the lock nut completely, just enough so I can okay, you couldn't even see it move just now. And I'll just lock it and then check it. And there you go. It just a touch too tight. So now I'm actually going to butt the nut off, but at the same time I'm going to turn both of them. I'm going to just loosen the nut a little bit first. And I want it moved so slight that your eye can't even see the movement. You're going to have to just feel it. And it's too tight. Still a touch too tight. Now we're not going to cut this out the video because we want to see the challenges that you run into when you're adjusting the valve. And I think it's too loose now, but I'll just check it. Because I could see it move. And it's too loose. I want to get it in that sweet spot. Okay, now I'm good. So now I have it in that sweet spot. And you can see how the feeler gauge going in is not loose and it's not tight. Just have that nice waxy feeling. So I can just lock it up a little bit tighter and double check it. Okay, so we're good. And now I'll move to the exhaust. And this part of the work, sometimes you're just playing a little game with yourself, trying to see how long it's going to take you to get it right. So with this one here, I think I beat the target here. I have it right in that sweet spot. So now I'm going to keep a little tension on the adjuster while I'm locking it so it don't move. Don't want nothing damaged. And we're good. So I have it right in the sweet spot there. Okay. So now, this is 4. So we've done 1, 3, 4, 2. So now I'm going to check for number 3 coming off the exhaust going on the intake. And you can see the rocker arm coming up, meaning the valve closing. And I'm checking just for when the exhaust move, and it just give me that ever slight jerk. So I'm going to go back. Okay, now I want to come forward just a touch. Right there. So, as I said before, in a modified racing engine, this type of stuff have to be exact, precise, perfect. So, we have a whole lot of other tools, degree pulley, dial indicator, different stuff we use to dial in. They call it dial in the cam. And here we go again. These ones very loose, so we'll just make some adjustment. And one of the reasons why I having that problem, because I gotta hold the tension for it not to turn when I'm turning the nut, but at the same time I can't hold it too tight where it's going to tighten up the feeler gauge. So I'm just holding a little tension on it, and I gradually increasing the tension and tightening the nut at the same time. Like that. And I have it right. See, that's waxy feeling. Okay. So now that one is complete. And I'll move to the other side. And I don't think I get it right, so I'll just it's completed. So this is good also. Okay, so that's the end of the adjustment for now. Once we completely fit the engine up and start it, we'll run it for take it on a test drive, run it for a while, and then I will need to readjust them over because the adjustment going to change a little. And I'm starting from a distance where I can keep going until the wrench click. I don't want to stop in between because that's going to change the reading.